All right, good evening, everyone.
They figured out one of the bottles.
Today is Wednesday, June 15th. It is now 7:05 p.m. This is the RTM Public Works Committee meeting. This is a special meeting dedicated to the considered acquisition of the Great Island. So I'd first like to just, while it's all fresh in our minds, I think everybody here did a tour.
Yes.
And so I'd just like to try and keep things a little light tonight, just to reiterate what I said earlier. Some of you were not in the room. The agenda does not call for a vote tonight. We have a meeting 1 week from tonight that will be a committee vote on the question, and then the following Monday will be the full RTM vote on that question as well. So we still have some time before this actually really comes to fruition. And so tonight I just want to reflect on what we all saw. I do have an agenda here of things of interest and consideration, I think, in terms of the acquisition from a public works perspective. So I'd like to start first, though, while it's all fresh in our minds, about what observations we all each had, and possibly some concerns per se. And we'll start with Mr. Edelman on my right, and we'll go around the room from there.
Thanks, Rolf. I hadn't expected to speak about my observations, but just shooting from the hip and very briefly.
There you go.
It is amazing natural beauty. I couldn't believe I was still in Darien, and I was less than a mile from 95. I thought it was, as everyone has said, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Like everyone else, I'm concerned about the cost. I'm very, very concerned about the town's ability to manage the many complex projects that we're signing up for here. This is not just a write a check and forget it. This is a significant management challenge that we are tackling if we pick this up, in addition to the financial challenges. But it's a stunning piece of property. I'll keep it short.
Thank you, Frank. Eric?
I'm trying to add to what Frank just said. It's really hard because it really is a beautiful piece of property. The buildings are a little run down. There definitely needs to be work there, but the space is good. There's opportunities to do a lot of things there, and that might be the hard part, is whittling it down to what's actually useful and practical and makes the most sense. So I imagine if the property does come into our possession, there will be a lot of conversations and a lot of planning that's going to need to be done and executed. So it is going to be a lot of work.
Jeff?
I don't have much to add in terms of the beauty and positive vibes around it. I think that's great. I think to Frank's point, there were probably two concerns. I don't think as a town, somebody's going to have to be dedicated to that whole project. There's going to be a full-time staff member that's responsible for that. I'd love to talk to Buchanan about how they manage Waveney. And they research Waveney. I think Waveney's a couple hundred acres bigger, but I'd love to know how they put that in place. I think that'd be a good sort of guidepost. And then my only other concern, and probably because I've been in those coves too much, is security. Security on the island, not just as a liability thing, but just in general. So I think we want to talk to the police chief and work out a solution on how to manage that. Now again, Waveney does this, everybody else does this. This is not a big issue, but I think if this goes forward and the world flips from it being private property, which scares people so they won't go on the boat, right, to Darien property, then everybody on those boats is going to think it's their property, and we're going to get into a situation there. So I think security comes to mind with me, but it's a pretty cool spot.
Yes,
just to address one point, Jeff, I think an element of the challenge we have is that whereas at Waveney, when the town became the owner, my understanding is when the town became the owner of that and it's governed through a kind of board of trustees or something, all of the facilities on that property were largely already there. The house, the parking, the playgrounds, the fields, and all that. Whereas we're going to have to decide for ourselves from square one what we want to be on that island, whether we love the natural beauty, we don't change a thing, or whether we bulldoze it, we put in a helicopter landing pad, or whatever we're going to do. Right? I mean,
I need a landing pad on that side of town. So it's been a bitch for me. I know, unbelievable. So
Having to work that
I
into
think it's
plan?
good. No, it's good, and I saw a place for the pilots, it's cool. But no, I think that that's true, and the topography of the property is so different than Waveney from a lot of perspectives. We're looking at everything else, so we're gonna really have to think through that. But man, it's a cool spot. The other thing I learned from Hayes, I think the other day, which is an interesting thing, is that we don't have to deal with parking or any of the traffic flows as long as we don't build anything right away, right? We can. I think the way the law reads is we could make the purchase, we could figure out all the things that we need to do before we have to address what I think will be one of the biggest challenges from an outsider perspective is how are we managing the cars and the flow there. And I'm just going to use the helicopter, but
Yeah, that's
The
another.
rest of
Can you
it.
just expand a little bit
Or
on
your yacht
what your
to get up.
concerns are around security? Because I hadn't considered that. So is your concern like, hey, people are getting off their boats and there are people renting those properties and that sort of a thing? Or is it people like slipping and drowning or all of the above? Or just, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you mean.
I actually hadn't. I don't anticipate most of those rental properties being rented after a certain period of time. So
Okay.
that actually hadn't crossed my mind. I wasn't thinking that they were going to be harassed.
Okay.
I was thinking more practically, having lived here for 20 years and been in those coves and in this town, that it likely becomes a pretty significant social place. And getting on and off boats, intoxicated people, whatever you want to call it. I just think it could turn into, Lake of the Ozarks too.
Got it.
So and I'm cool with that. That's fine. I'm not against any of
But
it.
it's more personal
But
injury.
it's
than
more,
that.
it's not even personal. I just think it's going to have to be handled in a way. And this is not unusual and I'm sure the police force can figure out how to do it. It's a very common thing. I just hadn't really realized it until I was standing out there looking at that. Yeah, on a beautiful day, it's going to be fun. So we have to think through that.
I'll just bring up one point about security is if you're traveling by car, there's a possibility to put up a gate, right? So I'm not addressing the water issue,
Yeah.
but there is always the possibility that people will come in and there's ample opportunity for people to vandalize, right? The other space that the town has within park, there's nothing there to vandalize, right? So here we have to worry about things like that, high school kids coming in, drinking, that could be a concern, right?
It's a big weed beach,
Yeah.
It's just going to have to rethink some. But again, there are towns all over the place. I mean, Todd's Point, Greenwich, all these people use this. So I would just get them all on the phone, get everybody in the room, and be like, "What best practices?
How do you do it?"
What are the best practices?
Yep.
How does this work?" And go from there. I think it's great, but there will be challenges.
Jackie, do you have any thoughts from the tour?
I came in late, so I don't know what I missed, but
Nothing.
obviously I loved the property, loved walking around it, would love the helicopter landing pad. Was very concerned about security. Just that day, there had been a story in the news about a drowning in the Rockaways where they didn't have enough lifeguards, and so they had closed the beach and said no swimming, but of course nobody followed the signs, and these two kids got swept away and drowned. And I don't know what that, you add alcohol into the mix. It's that safety aspect concerns me, especially really from a life perspective, but also from a liability. What is the town responsible for? What happens on the property? It's beautiful. I was not impressed to like it as much as I did when I was there. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, and it's hard to walk that property and not think that it would be an incredible asset to the town. But there's so much that needs to happen to make it usable.
Carrie, what are your thoughts?
Well, those of you that were on the tour with me could see how interested I was because of all the questions that I answered, and Jackie got dragged into the cedar closet with me.
Which I loved.
It was so cool, right? Or just the chandelier. That chandelier is actually real crystal and worth like $500,000. I mean, literally, that's what they told me. And
That's worth a lot.
and the sconces.
That'd be the first thing that would go in the security.
And the Rockefeller estate
I'd sell it to
actually
pay
wants
the
to
thing, put
purchase
the glass one up, right? Tell everybody it's the same.
Wow.
one of the Rockefeller estates wants to purchase those. So, but anyway, I mean, I think it's like going to a Rockefeller or Vanderbilt estate. If anybody's ever been on one of those tours before, I thought it was just incredible. I mean, and the opportunity just for a normal person to go in and tour it, if they opened it up or something like that, I could see that kind of thing too, because like Frank said, you felt like you were not in Darien. You felt like you were up in Newport or down, in Asheville, where they have one of the Vanderbilt estates. So that part is just incredible that we've got that history here. So I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I thought when we pulled in that the horse stables were the big house. I had no idea what to expect, and walking that property was incredible, and it's a place where I could see myself. I walk a lot, and I could see myself walking through and just feeling like I was on vacation as opposed to being at home in Darien, which on rough days is kind of a nice thing to do. I had a great time at the thing. I mean, it was just incredible. But like everybody else, it's got its issues. So there are a lot of issues, but I can see them being addressed over time. I don't think this is we buy it and fix it and move into it in a year. This is going to take some time and some doing, and I do like Jeff's suggestion where you get other towns that have similar things, and call Newport if you have to, right?
And just say, how do you do this?
You figure out how to do this right and make it the once in a lifetime opportunity that it is.
Yeah, Newport's a good example. It did feel like you were walking
Right?
along the cliffs.
Yeah.
It absolutely felt like that.
I had no idea that
Yeah.
something like that existed here.
No.
Because I won't go through that when it said no trespassing, and I saw
You're
this
a
sign.
rock.
One time I was like, oh my God, the police were gonna come get me. So I felt like I was living on the edge when I drove through that to do our tour the other day.
Yeah,
So
it was
cool.
pretty special.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yes. So natural beauty, everything. I couldn't agree more with everything that everybody said. I don't need a helipad because I don't have a helicopter yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Always about planning.
I may trade up.
You need the yacht launch though.
Yeah, exactly. I think about Weed Beach, I think about Pear Tree Beach, and I'm so glad that those things exist for us as a town to use. I don't know the history of our town. I don't know who set those pieces of property aside for all of us to use, but I think of us in their shoes right now, right? Whoever those people were. And I'm really glad that they did that. So if I think of it from that perspective alone, I have that answer in my head. But then I also have all of these cons of the property, which there are many. And I think, like you said, we're going to need a whole team dedicated just to this. But I don't know, I'm somewhere right in the middle. It was really an impressive space, and I think it would be a really amazing resource for the town. But I would like to see, and it's almost impossible to see how much it's going to cost us over how long. I would like to see what it's going to do to people's taxes, and how are we going to, how are we going to balance the budget? How are we going to monetize the island without ruining its natural beauty? I don't want to see a parking lot put in the middle of it. So there's a lot of question marks, and I think we'll hopefully cover some of them tonight. And then
Yes, I think we'll get into some particulars that I attempted to put on the agenda here in some sort of order, and we'll try and talk that through a little bit tonight.
And then from a security perspective, I know you and I were talking, you were talking about putting up a railing,
Yeah,
God,
there
we
was
would need a
that
railing
cement
here.
at the beach there. There's that big cement
Cement
pier, and it's just like
drop.
right. I mean, you could just take one step and you're right in the water.
definitely. But I'm sort of more of a European mindset where it's like, don't protect everybody from everything. Like, let's just, I mean, do people, I don't know how Weed Beach is patrolled in the evening. Is it? Like, do high school kids
it is a little bit.
Yeah.
take their paddle boats up and drink
They don't take their
there?
paddleboard, they drive their cars there and they use their substances.
I mean, that's what I did in high school. Not here, but like in my town.
I think I did it here.
Yeah.
But no, I agree, it's just a
And
discussion,
so
it's something we're
just
just gonna have
like-
to deal, it's not a deal killer or anything else, it's just, you just wanna kind of think
I
through
think
it a
that's
little
just
bit.
gonna be a
And again, it
thing.
just
That's
ends
a
up being a
thing.
budget line.
Yeah.
What's it
Right,
gonna
they'll
cost to
go
have
somewhere
them?
else if not there, so
Right.
it's fine. So,
We could send them to Waveney instead.
exactly.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, just briefly, I thought, as I was looking throughout it and discovering it, as all of us were, it's amazing to me what an asset. So to me, as I step back and think about, this would add a new aspect to, like, what is Darien? It's like, when we moved to town, the realtor showed us the good friends in Greenwich took us to Todd's Point. Said, they were showing it off as a point of pride. And so this kind of changes kind of what
That's
what
true.
people,
100%.
when you come to Darien, there's like, oh yeah, they've got that cool that area, whatever it evolves into becoming being. But it really does change the nature, I think, in a pretty positive way about what are Darien's assets as a town. So I was struck by that.
That's
Yeah, I like
a
that.
really good point,
Really
we don't have like New Cane's downtown.
Right.
Right.
And there's always been that sort of feeling around that. This would probably give us a totally new asset and probably improve overall the desirability of Darien, which would offset some of the issues on the finance side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really
And
good point.
it's part of, I call it your pay for, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, everybody's house value will go up a little bit, right?
100%.
And so as houses turn over, that gets built into the grand list and the tax revenue, et cetera. It will take a long time, but I agree, it adds to the desirability of the town.
But in the short term, how do you, for people whose taxes are gonna go up now and won't be able to appreciate the property on a daily basis or as
Sure.
how do you make that more palatable to people right now?
I think it's part of the challenge. I mean, look, from our perspective, the debate that's happening within my household is our window in town is probably sub 5 years, right? So this would be, for me personally, a net negative. I'm choosing to take a much longer term view than that, but like, there are people in that situation where it's gonna be a net negative for them.
Right.
Right,
Mhm.
right, they don't care to use it or anything.
If you move out of town anytime in the next 3 years, you're gonna pay in more than you're gonna get.
Mhm.
Except if your property value goes up because of
Right.
it, which it
It's
will.
priced in.
Right.
And I think, the Board of Finance, as Ralph was saying, my husband's in right now, and that's what they're gonna be talking
What
about.
they're tasked with, yeah.
So I think we'll find out what's gonna happen to our taxes, and, I think that's a definite concern, right now for the Board of Finance.
Absolutely.
But can I just make a point about that home appreciation? I do agree this becomes another jewel in the crown for the town. It's another destination, it's another reason to pick Darien, which is great for all of us. But that appreciation does not apply to all properties evenly.
No, it
There
doesn't.
are $5 million homes on Longneck Point that are all of a sudden going to be $6 or $7 million homes because we now have a new town park a quarter mile away, which is easy to walk to and perfect to, and it's never going to be developed. And I live on the opposite side of town. I'm sure we'll see some type of benefit if and when we decide to sell, but that's going to be much more diffuse.
Yes.
And harder
Right.
to attribute.
Correct, without a doubt.
Jeff, did you notice anything of concern? Because everything you were saying was very, very positive, very upbeat.
I mean, from our perspective in Public Works, it's like there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So, I couldn't help but notice all of the things that, from our perspective, it's like, it's a new part of the town infrastructure, and it's as big of a piece of town infrastructure as anything we have, probably including this building. So it has to be professionally run.
There was
It has
like
to be run the way
no
we
cell
run.
signal there. There's like no cells. I mean, we need cell towers.
Yeah.
No, see, I think that's positive.
I'm joking. Totally joking. That's not the infrastructure I think we're talking about, right?
No, remember we were
I
talking about
appreciate what
Verizon
you're saying.
Presents Great Island.
Yes, Thompson.
Yeah, we could host the Bachelorette of Darien on there.
There you go.
Perfect.
And
David is our host.
Waiting's wedding business is done.
Yeah.
It could be. It could be. Look, so the net of it for me is I currently remain undecided. I am very on the fence. There's a lot of pros and cons. It is an amazing property. The nature on it is spectacular, and it is a bunch of wonderful small spaces. Right? They are chopped up. It's not one big cohesive thing. It's a series of wonderful small spaces. And so how do you could choose to connect them in some way. That's an infrastructure work, et cetera. Or you could leave them as is. But we need to think through that. And so at the end of the day, it's a big nut to buy. If I think about this on a over 10-year time cycle, I do think this is probably net positive. This asset's not coming back. It would be a signature piece for the town and all of that. And it costs $130 million, so let's not lose sight. That's a really big number. But my biggest thing is, what process are we going to use to make decisions around how to manage not just the property day to day, but also the investments in the property? I agree. We could, take over a huge portion of Waveney's wedding business, but you can't do that tomorrow.
No.
Because that house needs $5+ million worth of work. So are we going to fund that up front? What are we going to do? How are you going to, a series of decisions need to be made. You effectively, I'm going to use a crass way of saying it, you effectively need to run that asset as a business.
I don't think that's a crass way to say it. There needs to be a CEO of that
Yeah.
process with a board and with a group of people
And
that
I'm
are
not
responsible.
convinced a political process, I'm not going to be specific to this time, a political process, period,
Right.
is the mechanism to do that.
No,
No, and that's a fair point.
Frank,
The board.
during the meeting on the Great Island last week, you brought up what I thought was phenomenal. Could you share that with our group for those of?
I'd love to. I appreciate it, and I'll try and keep it short, Rolf.
It's okay.
But I completely agree, Ian, with what you're saying, and for me, the key word is governance, right? I've got thoughts and fears about the price tag, irrelevant at the moment, right? We've got sharp financial people in town who are going to look at that, and I had a conversation with Jack Davis today, so we explored that in excruciating detail. And I also have my own ideas about what ought to go on the island, and I'm not going to share that here because that's kind of premature, right? But what I care about is governance. I'm profoundly concerned, as much as I think this is a great opportunity, I'm profoundly concerned that with the wrong governance, this becomes either a wasted investment or a toy or a vanity project. None of those are acceptable, right?
Agreed.
My personal view, I have two objectives, and so we have to agree on an objective before we agree on the strategy, right? My two objectives are, number one, to get the governance out of the selectmen and out of the selectmen's committee, because I feel that that's too close to the political process and doesn't have the continuity. A committee of the selectmen can be disbanded at any time, can be reshuffled at any time, can have its members swapped in and swapped out, and I want something with a lot more continuity, right? So I think we need a permanent permanent is a tough word, at least a 30-year commission matching the length of the potential debt, right? And this would be the independent Great Island Commission that would be responsible for two things. Number one, my first objective is to kind of do all the decision making about what goes on the island. That is, soliciting public input, coming up with strategy, evaluating alternatives, brainstorming better alternatives, making a decision, managing the property, implementing, dealing with tenants, all that stuff should be this independent commission manages this stuff. And if they decide to hire somebody to do that, that's their thing. If they decide to manage as volunteers, that's great. The second thing they need to do is they need to manage all the finances, right? And I am personally, again, one man's view, right? But I am personally highly concerned that when you put an enormous amount of debt like this into the town budget, it is not squeezable, right? In the future, when we had COVID, they came back to the schools and the selectmen and everybody and said, okay, everyone's got to squeeze. can't squeeze contracts and you can't squeeze debt. So my profound concern is that in the future, I want to insulate, I mean, and our town budget process is already, on the one hand, very kind of well-managed and interactive, and I think we do a fantastic job in this town of managing the money, but it's gloves off. I mean, it's bare knuckle. And people fight hard for the things they need to get in the budget, right? I'm very concerned that in the future, this investment will crowd out other worthy things we need to do that we can't even foresee today. I mean, I don't want to dwell on it. We've had these tragedies at the high school. We may need to invest in the high school in order to help kids' mental health. There's 1,001 things we may need to do in the future in relation to climate. Who knows what's going to happen, right? I don't want this to be in the town budget to crowd it out. So therefore, my proposal is that the Independent Great Island Commission would have assessment authority parallel to the sewer commission, meaning it would not be part of the mill rate, it would be something independent. I don't think we can do that at acquisition because it's too short a time frame. But I think that over the year from July of 22 to June 30th, 23, we can set that up. And I would think that by July 1 of 23, we should have a functioning independent Great Island Commission with assessment authority that would be able to, I mean, it could be part of your property tax. They could do it on some other property basis. They could do it on usage basis. They could do it on per capita basis. I don't know how they're going to assess.
What would it look like on usage basis? Like, how would that?
Again,
Yeah.
you need to get a bunch of smart people to kind of figure this
I was
out.
just throwing
The idea would be that, look, right now you pay, is it $50 or $100 for a beach permit, and you get Pear Tree Point and Weed Beach.
Right.
You know, if you had to pay $500 for an additional access to Great Island,
I'd do it.
then many people would do it. And I would say that as part of that, that should be open to all Darien residents on 4th of July, Memorial Day, and Labor Day, and some of the big holidays and a couple of weekends, so that even if you don't pay for that, you still have some access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then for people who want more regular access or more continuity, they can pay the extra premium. And should that be 200, 500, 1,000, I don't know what the right number is. Is that scaled by something? I don't know. That could be a usage fee. Now, usage fees are not going to cover
Right.
the $7 million or more of debt service costs, but just as one source of income.
Right.
I would think an independent Great Island Commission that has that budgetary authority would be able to be a perfect point of contact and a less politicized point of contact for a Friends of Great Island or some other private charitable group that might arise to support the activity on Great Island. If somebody in town, and I appeal through Channel 79 to see if anybody's feeling generous, but it would be great if there was somebody out there who wanted to say, oh, I'm going to fund the debt service for a year. I'm going to write a check for $7 million to Friends of Great Island. That would be a wonderful thing to do. And if that is that a naming opportunity, that's fantastic. You will name
Yeah, I
it.
think he would definitely, or she would definitely have the name rights or something here.
A bench.
I'll call it Oban Island for all of 24 if that's what's going to get $7 million out of Rolf here. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, where have we seen things that work well?
Yeah.
This Public Works Committee has, several cycles ago, sponsored the Public Pedestrian Infrastructure Advisory Committee. And that was a nonpartisan group of citizens that came together in town, and they assessed all pedestrian infrastructure in town, and they made recommendations to the Public Works Department, and that work is probably at this point 6 years old, and it still generates dividends today. That was an excellent process. We also have a number of fantastic building committees that have sprung up in the last several years and have been properly charged and professionally managed and have done a really, overall, very solid job of running the building projects. What have we seen that's gone wrong, right? We've seen things that have gone wrong that have been vanity projects. We've seen things where executives didn't listen to the town. The two examples that come to mind are the shuffle, right, which goes back now a dozen years, but where there was in fact a referendum where people turned it down. We just didn't turn it down by enough of a supermajority to stop it. So whether you think the entire process of 8-9 million was a waste, or only the overspend of $1.5 million was a waste, there's a lot of money wasted there, and a lot of hard feelings come out of that. And then more recently, I think the Pear Tree Point debacle was a vanity project. Now, both of those projects had committees, but they were committees of the Board of Selectmen. Mm-hmm. And those committees were, an assemblage of like-minded folks who knew what had to happen, even though what they knew was a bad idea, right? So again, I would say we really need to have an independent commission with, the normal minority representation rules, with the normal kind of public transparency rules about process. And my personal view is I want to get the cost of Great Island, acquisition, maintenance, development, remediation, out of the town budget, and I want to get it as a separate line item, just like the sewer commission is. Rant over.
Thank you, because I thought that was brilliant the other day, and that's why I asked you to share it with the group.
Was that what he said the other day, or was that totally new?
I think it was a little shorter, actually.
I just want to make sure
I think you thought about it a little before.
Well, I do want to
Is
answer,
it all right
Karen, can I
if
just add one?
Patrick Kane, he wants to call in?
Yeah.
And is that all right?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I forgot my phone. He was maybe
He
trying
said
to call
that.
me.
He
so
said
I- Please tell him I
Frank,
apologize.
one note to follow up on
Yes,
that is
sir.
that if the only kind of, and it's not even a good example, but there's a corollary here in Fairfield County where public golf courses in different towns up and down the coast here,
Yeah.
there are numerous examples where public golf courses that are in the budget and that are managed by the town are underfunded, whereas public golf courses owned by the town that have an independent board of directors, independent financials, are all invested in as kind of in an independent entity because they run them for perpetuity, because their mindset is as a nonprofit to be run in perpetuity. And that financing, there's a real emotional difference in running something for in perpetuity versus on an annual budget cycle.
I
You know,
really
the other
like-
parallel that I would draw, just really quickly, and I'm sorry, is we have already a great example in the Friends of Selleck's Woods. So Selleck's Woods is actually two adjacent parks that are between Little Brook Road and the highway, and that is town-owned property or Darien Land Trust property, but it's really commingled and managed as one property. But the Friends of Selleck's Woods is a private nonprofit charitable group, which is chaired by my neighbor and friend, Chris Filmer, and they do a fantastic job of maintaining the park, and they do community outreach. They had their festival for kids a couple of weekends ago. They do, and obviously all the work they do is by volunteer. They are a focal point for financial contributions as well as labor contributions to the town, and it clearly reduces the burden on the town for having that resource for people. I would think that, again, an independent commission would be a fantastic contact point for a Friends of Great Island society that might spring up.
And I've spent some time talking with Frank about his idea, and I'm very supportive of it. I would even rescind what I said to you last night and say it should run forever, right, as opposed to be time bound. The more I thought about it last night, but especially because as I think about all the investments and trade-offs that need to be made. So right now, Great Island's finances, per the Board of Selectmen presentation, is throwing off about $410,000 of net profit, net of expenses. And the equestrian lease is about $240,000. So it's about half of your net income. And there's a serious dialogue that needs to be had about whatever we choose to do with the town, with the space. If you let the public through there, can the public and the horses coexist at the same time? And that is a difficult decision, right? And should go through a serious debate with a lot of input, and because it has long-term implications on what money is available to invest in that property, at least on the current run rate, right? And so then you need to think about what are the offsets of the revenue, and what are the, we should go, that is a complicated process that I think needs a structured governance.
So just to put a period at the end of the sentence, like I said, I've been talking with a number of folks in town. No surprise, I feel pretty strongly that this governance solution is the right one. And Rolf, I will be circulating to the committee a draft of a proposal, a resolution I'm going to propose at next week's meeting. So I'd ask for time on next week's agenda for that. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that we don't discuss any of this through email, because discussing it through email is a huge violation of kind of open transparency rules. So you will get from me a document, and please don't discuss it with me.
No problem.
I mean, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but seriously, I don't want to go the wrong way with the rules about transparency. So you're going to get something from me in the next few days. I tried to draft it in the last few days, I just couldn't get it done. but I want to make sure I get it right. And then we can talk about it at the next meeting.
So I like the idea of the commission. One thing I'll point out, though, the commission, and you gave good examples of how it's worked in the past. I'll just point out that those commissions were very narrow focused. This is,
And they were short term.
yeah, this is just huge, right? You know, and that's just, you know, something that we're going to run up against, right?
Well, so
But I think that's a big
Yes and
argument
no.
for
I
it
mean, look-
than
look-
against, right?
Yeah.
You want the Board of Selectmen doing this? No, I
well,
don't.
and the sewer commission, I mean, the sewer system's pretty expensive, right? So, and has been running for
50, 60 years.
50, 60, so, you know, anyway. There are examples that have run for a while.
Okay. Well, my concern was just the knowledge base that you need to have to
Oh, I see.
To
It's
everything.
diversity of
everything
issues
you want
gotta
to do
create, yeah.
with this, right?
But again, you're more likely to have that on a formal commission that
Yeah.
has this charge
Right.
than on an ad hoc committee of the Board of Selectmen.
Right, you'll get those experts, those subject matter experts in,
Got it.
whereas Board of Selectmen, you don't necessarily have that.
I agree.
Okay. Patrick, are you there?
I am here, thank you.
All right, Patrick, I apologize. I forgot to bring my cell phone. I suspect you were trying to call me.
I was, but that's okay. Thank you, Carrie, for connecting me in.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to say in general about the island? We all went through the tours, and that's what we were talking about, our observations and that sort of thing.
I've done a tour as well. I did one this past Saturday and was blown away on many levels, and so I won't repeat what I imagine many of you discussed, other than to say it's a lot to take in. I'm not as concerned about some of the logistical issues, traffic flows and that sort of thing. Todd's Point and Waveney, provide a, reasonably good examples of how things can be managed along those lines. The agenda, however, and I don't know how far you are into the agenda.
We haven't even started yet.
Okay. Well, then I'll stop there because I thought it was a fairly comprehensive list. I do think, and again, I came in a little bit late into this conversation about governance and how the whole property will be managed, both financially and day to day. And I think I think the Public Works Committee should have a say in that. But I think it crosses a lot of different boundaries and a lot of different committees, and I don't think that's going to be settled before we all vote, before the RTM votes on the whole transaction. I think, in my mind, it's just something that we're going to have to accept that if it goes forward, we're going to have to accept that that's something that's going to have to evolve, because there are a lot of great examples out there, whether it's a golf course, Selling Woods, Waveney, I don't know how Todd's Point is managed, but there are a lot of different examples that we can take from and learn from, and I'm sure develop a great system to do that.
Okay, thank you. Last, Richard, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Like all of you, I thought it was a magnificent piece of property. For voters in town such as myself, who's 79, to vote for it is not in my self-interest for increased taxes. So if I vote for it, it's because you want to leave something to the town. I think for many of the voters in town, there will be a certain frustration, because now that I've toured it, there is no way that property can be open for a couple of years. The roads have to be made wider. There's so much that has to be done, that we're voting for something that is probably not going to be usable to maybe, say, 3 years after it's purchased. In addition...
At even the lowest level.
Yeah, at the lowest level. In addition, the main house, we speak of, catering, that house needs extensive renovation. So you almost need a building committee like that built the high school or the public works that's assigned to, take care of that. The biggest concern I have, and why I do favor it, is I would hate to see it go to a developer. And my view is, if we purchase it and it doesn't work out, the town can sell it in 10 years. We can always sell this property in the future. We will have a certain economic loss, but we might not. And a developer, if they take AG 30, I mean, they might just go in and put in half-acre mega mansions and just,
Zoned for 1 acre.
yeah.
1 acre lots, which is
But you-
amazing to me, whoever put that together.
Yeah, and you can bypass, but you can even bypass that.
Yeah.
So I kind of view that, I'm in favor of it, but it's not my own economic self-interest. Because 79, I will get limited use. But,
I'm rooting for you, Richard.
okay.
I'll take the overall.
And some support as well.
To your point, Pear Tree Point Beach was donated to the town by the Ziegler family.
Okay.
If you notice when you made the tour, the Norotan Fireboat has
Yep.
been there for years. The Ziegler family has been very generous to the town of Darien over the years, and even though the Zieglers apparently aren't selling, it's the other name of the family.
Steinkraus?
Yeah, I do think if we pass this up, a developer will get hands on it, and it will be gone forever. If we take it, if it doesn't work out 10 years from now, we can sell it, and I question if we'll lose money in selling it, you know.
I don't think it's gonna go down in value.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah, so I mean, but I was blown away. I do think, I mean, maybe that horse stable stays for a number of years and generates $300,000 of income to the town. I mean, you know, but again, I do think we need a commission, some kind of commission to do it. I'm not, when it's taxes, I'm never really in favor of giving anybody the right to tax me. So on that.
Let's just be
But
clear.
I do accept the idea of some governance body doing it. And the reason I say that is, sewer commission is generally considered to have been well-run. But, you know, if you look at the history of where, in the last 10 years, of where they didn't put in sewers and why, it wasn't well-run. They changed the dimension on the pipes so that some homes now you couldn't just hook up to it. And so the sewer commission, and the history of it, not more than the last number of years since I've been here, we were going to have sewers in Littlebrook, and they hooked us up with 5 Mile River Road. Well, we had no economic interest with 5 Mile River Road, so we didn't get sewers. 5 Mile River Road got the sewers, and what happened? Subdivision. Pear Tree Point got sewers, and you had subdivision. There's a sewer line in front of this property. You can have subdivision. It can be developed by a developer. So that's where. So even though it's not, I do favor it, although it's not in my self-interest economically.
I just want to address your point about if we don't buy it, a developer's going to buy it. And I'm just stating this, I'm not saying I believe it, but people will say you shouldn't play offense so to play defense, right? You shouldn't buy it because you don't want to just give it up to somebody, you know? It's like you're playing defense. You're playing offense to play defense, basically. Yeah, you just make you're not making it available to others. You might not want it, but you don't want others to have it. So that's a tough decision.
Yeah, but the town, I mean, you go over to home school, and they bought the property and back a home school because a piece of property became available. When I first moved to town, they wanted to close home school. Okay, you know, I mean, so I do think, and there's property that maybe you go down by the train station, and there's those houses that get built right adjacent to the train station. I forget what it's called, where the town went in and purchased it. And I think there's been the Propaccini property. The town passed up purchasing it, and it got developed. So, you know, should we have purchased Propaccini? I have no idea. But I mean, that's a piece of property that went and developed. You know, so if we don't purchase it, I think a developer with a lot of money will purchase it.
Can I just respond very quickly to one thing Eric said? I think if the two choices are either we buy it and if we do whatever we do, or a developer buys it and they're gonna put houses on there. I think when we think about the cost of this property, it's not just the cost of the acquisition, the remediation, all the other stuff. It's also the cost of the real estate taxes we're not gonna collect on this property anymore, which is, I think, $700,000 a year. And when we're comparing that scenario of buy it, we also need to compare against the opportunity cost of the real estate taxes on, I think Jen Leahy said to me, about $275,000, million worth of aggregate home cost of the new homes on Great Island, which, what do we tax at 70% times 15 mils is, it's a lot of money.
2-3 million.
So it's probably about $2 or $3 million of potential income
to the town
from Great Island that we would be foregoing.
Which we'll just spend.
Well,
I just looking at the way we do things around here, yeah, okay, great. Now we've got a hugely developed property, we've got more money, and we'll just spend it on things we don't need.
Right.
So Rolf, on the tour, Jennifer mentioned that Redness and Mead had done a survey of the property on things like roads and specs. I can't find it on the town's website. I was just looking. I know it's been done because I spoke to Craig. But is there a way to get a copy of that?
I think we would have to pursue that with, Monica and the people in town hall, because that study was done at their behest. So
can we request that?
I think we should request it, yes, and hopefully.
Do I need to do that, or do we do it through the committee?
No, I'll take that one on.
Okay.
As we go through the list, by the way,
Otherwise,
we may have other things.
We have an agenda.
Okay, and I'm not doing them all, okay?
I was trying to get you to your agenda.
Give out some assignments here, okay?
Ralph, I'm curious, what did you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a magnificent property, no question about it. I do have similar concerns that all you have about the condition that it's in. There's no way that property can just, be bought on Friday and we open it up on Monday. I mean, it's just out of question. I do agree with the premise that we need a management group of some sort to take on the property, and more than just a special project for a limited period of time like the Ox Ridge Building Committee. This would have to be something that's more long-term and stays with the property for as long as we think it's necessary to get it where we want it to be. I'm in a similar boat to Richard insofar as, monies that I'll be putting into it as a taxpayer, I probably won't see come back to me for quite some time, if ever. But that's a personal issue. There are a number of things that concern me about the condition of the property. Much of it's in our agenda here. The one thing that did occur to me, though, in walking through the property is, and she had mentioned it numerous times, see all the beautiful trees, I'm thinking to myself, what if all the beautiful trees caught fire? Okay, because that would be just a nightmare. I mean, so that's part of my concern is, okay, from just one perspective, should there be a problem? Okay, there's plenty of fuel there to go up in flame, that's for damn sure. Can you get the fire department in there in a quick, efficient manner, particularly if it's open to the public and you've got people on the premises? How's that going to work? First of all, how are you going to get everybody out of danger? Okay, how are you going to get the fire department in? Yeah, I saw hydrants. We saw hydrants, and she says, "I don't think that one works."
Right.
Okay, which definitely caught my attention. Relative to what if there was a fire. So that's the kind of thing that's on my mind. If you're going to bring in the public, then you have.
Can I address that?
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I'm not worried about the fire department. If there was an issue about being able to put out fires, first of all, we have enormous pumpers and all the water we need out of the sound that they can pump water from. We're already equipped for that. And I think if there was an issue about being able to put out structure fires, I think that's, on the one hand, it's a little bit out of our purview, and that really should be public health and safety.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other structures there that the Ziegler's and the Sandkrauses have dealt with, from a fire protection standpoint for many, many years. So that's one issue I wanted to address. Secondly, it's been suggested that we wouldn't be able to use that property for many years after consummation of the sale. The number that the Board of Selectmen or some of the members of the board are using, is probably about a year, is what they're expecting. Now again, that's a moving target, but in terms of, yeah, you couldn't open it up day one and let 21,600 or whatever it is, 499 people have access to it right away, and there are obviously safety issues that have to be taken into account. But I don't think it's 3 years. And in terms of the roads, there's no reason why we couldn't put in, one-way signs, and there's a very specific traffic flow that runs through there. I'm not in the camp that thinks that we have to widen the roads so that there's two-way access all the way around the property. So there's a lot of back and forth that has to take place here, and a lot of thinking through. But anyway, I just want to make those 2 points.
Yeah, well taken. The only last comment I would have from my own observations of the situation is that this is an existing place. It's functioning. It has an income stream. So from my own perspective, I don't think the town has to rush into doing, you're talking about within 1 year's time frame to have this open to the town. I don't think we have to rush into that. I'd rather get the organization set up properly, let them study it and come up with a plan, and then see from there what the timing is, okay? I don't want people start putting, okay, we're gonna open this in a year and then rush and potentially make a mess out of it. I'd rather we take the proper time. It's not gonna go anywhere. It generates enough income to self-sustain for now, and do it in a more studied and methodical manner. That's my interest.
I agree with that, and I want to pick on the horse thing a little bit more, which is just to say, like, it's a key part of the financials, and at least from what I've understood from people that I've known that have used that center, I wouldn't want to rush, because I'd want to be very cautious about what liability we just bought. I'm not convinced that right-of-way is in great condition, and so if we're going to keep that as an active business, we would need to think about what insurance we need and whatnot. Like,
yeah, there are a lot of different moving parts there.
I mean, I told you the story
and
about
the horse stable is just one of them.
Right, but I told you the story about my friend who's a part of the ceiling almost hit her daughter. Those are the things that I think we might need to find out and deal with quickly.
All right, so I'd like to, one last point. Okay.
Just think about the whole time frame thing is concerning to me, that some people who are elected officials have a shorter time frame where they want to get things done under their watch. That might rush things, and that should be a concern of everybody's.
All right, so I have a little gift, so to speak. I want you to take one and pass it around. I only want you looking at the top page to start. This is almost like back in high school.
Don't turn the page.
Don't open your book until I say it.
This is terrifying. This is a bad.
If any of you are having a
I
apologize. Okay.
I'm getting out of here.
It's not purple.
Okay.
It's not blue books.
I tried to
Starting to shake. Where's the skin?
I tried to print. I tried to print the clearest I could with my pathetic printer. But if you look at the first page, and it's labeled at the top there, topography, which didn't really print topography very well, so I apologize for that.
Not at all.
Okay, but that's the overall. This, by the way, just point of information, you can link to what's called MapGeo through the Darien website, and this is MapGeo, which is also put together, I think, through Google. Okay, but this is basically the basic island here, and of course you can see in the middle there, that larger structure, that's the horse stable and the riding rink behind it. Okay, and if you were able to see this better in a topographical printout, that actually comes in at about 40 feet with the way this was done. Okay, 40 feet above sea level, if you will, the elevation. Okay, and she was saying during the tour that they were 50 feet. This is only measured in increments of 40, I think, 20, and 10, something like that. So it doesn't, if there aren't 50-foot elevations, they're not going to register here, okay? So that's the basic island, to make the point. Now, if you take that page and flip it over, okay? And you see at the title there, that's wetlands and water courses, okay? And you'll see there's, at the top, there's that whole grid print out there. That's that, all that, whatever, marshland, grassland, it's deeded, okay, part of the deed. It's on the back side of the front
Deed
page.
set aside or whatever they call it.
Right, that's the set aside. It'll still be owned by Ziegler's,
Okay.
but it's part of the sale.
Stonecrest.
Okay, Steincrest, okay, so that's what that is. And then you'll see below, just below that on that left side, the water courses, I mean, those are bodies of water that are along both the coastline around the entire island. And you can see that some of them are different shades of water course that exists. And the one that I really am interested for you to see is another overlay that's on the final page, so we'll go to that. And this is with the FEMA flood zone. So what I would say to you is take the first page, put that on one side, take the FEMA zone page, put it on the other side in front of you, and look at the two of them. And you'll see that there's quite a bit of flood hazard, if you will, with the FEMA flood zones. Okay.
In particular, that polo field.
Yeah, in particular the polo field.
Underwater.
Okay, and if you look at the northeast corner, water flows through and separates the very tip of the island there on the northeast corner. Okay.
Was that where the paddle?
Yeah, that's adjacent to where the paddle launch is being talked about and discussed. Okay, now this flood zone, they have different designations. This particular flood zone.
Yeah, is this like the 100-year FEMA?
Well, here, I'll read you exactly
Okay.
what comes from FEMA on this. That has been designated as a flood zone AE, okay, which is a special flood hazard area. Special flood hazard areas represent the area subject to inundation by 1% annual chance flood. Structures located within the SFHA, the Special Flood Hazard Area, have a 26% chance of flooding during the life of a standard 30-year mortgage. Of course, this is written in the interest of homeowners, okay? So that's why they mention a 30-year mortgage, okay? But it's a 30-year period. Federal floodplain management regulations and mandatory flood insurance purchase requirements apply in these zones. So if there were ever any discussion about building a structure or rebuilding a structure that's within this flood zone, it would be subject to FEMA regulations.
So the other thing I'll call out in looking at this, the entryway road
Yep.
is in the flood zone.
Yep.
Well, that was why she pointed to the causeway, the grass causeway, as the emergency exit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which is
is
also
also
in the
in the
flood
flood
zone.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
My house, does anyone else live in the flood zone? My house is in the flood zone. Everybody else?
That's not in the flood zone.
I live in one, and it's crazy that my house is in.
Yeah, 'cause-
I'm AE,
Yeah, I
and
am
there's
too.
no chance my house
No
will
chance.
overflow.
And even in, what was,
Same.
was it Irene or
Okay.
Sandy was the bad one, right?
Yeah.
Irene was the.
Superstorm Sandy, yeah.
Yes, Sandy. Sandy, it came up and touched my garage, just part of it, barely, and that's it.
How about the
So-
storms that came through last year?
And I have to have flood, no, nothing. Dries
Ours
a bone.
Drives a boat.
But the people across the street had it in their yards, but that was it.
Yeah.
How much is the flood insurance?
Well,
Keeps on
you can only
It
buy
keeps
it,
going
you
up.
can only buy it from the federal government.
No, not
Right,
true,
but-
not true.
Not true? Excuse
Just-
me?
It's cheaper, so now I have it through FEMA because it was cheaper.
Okay.
But you usually get like a flood insurance broker person and they kind of shop it around for you and
Oh.
can find the best rate. And if you're not building anything there, like building a structure there, you don't need flood insurance, right? So it'd only be if you're planning to build an actual structure there.
Right. You're
So
absolutely right.
I don't think the town would probably, it would behoove us build a structure there because then you have to pay, and it has to do with the value of the property and also how much value you are putting into it and you want to cover. So if you're like, well, I don't care about my stuff, just give me the minimum, it's not all that bad. But if you care about your stuff, it's different.
Well, so what does this mean for the developers? does this limit the desirability of the property?
Well, it means that if they do want to put any structure on those areas where it shows as a flood zone, they're going to have to comply with FEMA regulations, and that probably means they're going to have the houses
On
elevated.
stilts, absolutely. Yeah, you can't do a new structure.
But I would say it doesn't affect desirability. Go
Right.
to the
Yeah.
Roten Bay
Yeah,
Right.
that's true.
and look at all the houses that have been raised.
Right.
It's true.
So, the same thing, a developer would just raise houses here.
Right.
So, as far as building,
Yeah.
and the key here is, there's a sewer
Right,
that it can go to,
Right.
not septic.
Well, and I would
Oh, yeah.
say probably everybody that lives on the water in Darien is in a flood zone.
In a flood zone, yeah.
And it doesn't, listen, nobody's not buying those houses.
Look at what they're building
It's like a
on
plus.
Content Island. It's staggering.
Yeah.
And they're building it with like they're houses that are raised up a whole story, and the lower part is, I guess, a garage or storage or whatever, but it's all breakaway, and if the sea comes through, and the house is meant to withstand that.
Pretty cool.
Where is that at?
Content Island.
And then the only structures that are in this flood zone right now are those beach cottages down there by that
Yes, yes, by the beach, those would be vulnerable, shall we say.
area.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is,
If I could jump in, I don't think flood, look, the town is gonna self-insure on flood damage, and whoever said it, I don't think we're gonna be building much, and if we do, we're certainly gonna be mindful of where the flood zones are. And, like, the main house has been there for, a long,
Yeah.
long time. Not to say that climate hasn't changed, but I don't think flood should be an issue that really we should be focused on much here.
Yeah, I hear you, Patrick. Here, I'll just finish this and then we'll move on. That according to NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmosphere Administration, that the northeast coast of the United States is up till year 2050 is expected to gain an increase in sea levels of anywhere between 10 and 14 inches. That's what they say. Now, I don't know if I believe that, but that's
In the
another
next how
factor.
many years?
Up until 2050.
But we won't have paid off the debt from this.
All right,
And
so
remember, if the average sea level goes up 10 to 14 inches, that means in the storm, it's
yeah, you
a
get
multiplier.
You get a storm surge with a high tide, then it's going to get real
And
interesting.
wind, and falling wood. Yeah.
Okay, so if I may go to the agenda, the first thing we start off with is coincidentally the sewer system. Okay. Now I know nothing. I mean, they keep talking about we have these pipes and they can access them. I have no idea where they are. I have no idea what their size is.
So
How
the
many more they
presentation
can-
that Monica gave
Yeah.
was that there are two pipes that both terminate in the neighborhood of the big traffic circle in the upper left part of the page. That one of them supports, I think it's 10 to 20 homes, and the other supports 19 to 57 homes, is my recollection. So there's capacity there for a fairly large number of residences, if that's what was going on the island, or for a reasonably significant volume of effluent.
Affluent, yes. So I mean that's a lot of hookups. As a park, if you will. I mean, I don't think you'd need any more than what's there now.
Right, well, the issue is that none of the buildings are actually on sewer right now.
Yeah.
They're all using leaching fields, which I have as I've shared with you, Rolf, I have serious concerns about old ancient leaching fields and
Yep.
their ability to kind of protect the sound.
Yep.
But any property any hookups that we would choose to do on that island, we would have to extend the mains, extend the connections to those buildings. It's not like underneath the roads there. Right, so as we've noted, the topography is so hilly.
Oh yeah.
Right, we're gonna have to put sewer lines in that follow that undulation,
Oh, that'll be fun.
right, in order to collect the
Affluent.
effluent from from whatever sources there are.
And I would just, again, back to the governance around what decisions we make about free use. As current state, it's on septic, it's functioning, it's great. Depending upon what we choose to do with it, we may or may not have to put sewer in. If we have to put sewer in, it's a big deal.
Yeah. mean, it's great that there's capacity in the area right at that circle, fantastic. But it's not a trivial matter to get it from that circle to the horse barn, whether it's used as a horse barn or anything else,
Wherever
or
it's
to any
coming
other
from.
point on the island.
Right.
Wherever it's
Yeah,
going.
you almost need to have a plan of what you're gonna do on the island before you extend it, which
Right.
Absolutely.
No
seems
question,
like.
no question.
Which would involve more like a vision for a plan that probably extends 20, 30 years.
Yeah, there has to be a 2-year, a 4-year, a 6-year, an 8-year. I mean, it has to go all the way through the chronology until you get to your final goal. I mean, that's the way I would approach it. Okay, so the good news is there's pipes. The bad news is there's nothing hooked up to the pipes. So if that was a concern, then that would have to be addressed and the costs related there too. Lovely.
And again, you're literally at sea level in order to get those pipes, in order to get your effluent from the homes or the facilities or the town facilities, whatever they are, you would need to have probably a pressurized line to get uphill.
Would you explain pressurized for the benefit of the committee?
Sure. So most lines again, all of our sewer waste from Darien, every drop goes to Stamford. They go to Stamford through 2 pipes that go underneath Holly Pond. And then they are taken in on the Cove side of Stamford and they go across Stamford to the Stamford Processing Center. And we're about 15% of Stamford's aggregate total waste. Any waste that is at an elevation above those pipes can mostly be fed through a gravity mechanism to get the waste from where it's created down to the pump station that pumps it across Holly Pond. Things that are below that elevation or that don't have significant kind of height difference, they need pressurized lines in order to make sure that waste doesn't pond up somewhere in the system, but continues to make progress towards the pump. Is it at Weed Beach is where the pumps are? Or is it the pump station is right by the Y? I'm trying to remember.
Well, there is one by the Y.
Yeah, there's a pump at the Y, but I'm trying to remember.
There's one at Wheat Beach.
But I think the
As
Weed
you
Beach
come
is the
into
main
Wheat Beach,
one
yes.
that sends
Yeah.
it across Holly
Yeah.
Pond.
And so cost differential for a pressurized line,
Oh, more.
but double, quadruple? Okay.
Yeah, we need.
Got
experts.
Ed Gentile can tell you.
You hear pressurized,
Yeah.
think money.
Yes.
I'm hopeful that when we meet again a week from today, that Ed can be part of our meeting. So we would have an opportunity, hopefully then, to go through this with him. Okay, next, road systems, ingress, egress. Patrick has already kind of spoken to that with the fact that, it could be worked where instead of getting crazy hung up about widening roads, that you could just have one way in, the way you did come in for the tour, and then come all around to the exit where we walked out at the end of the tour. I mean, that certainly is feasible.
So I did have an opportunity very briefly to talk to Craig Flaherty after our tour yesterday, and I asked him about this, which is one of the reasons I'm interested in that survey. So the information I got is that I was specifically focused on that entryway, and could you actually widen the road, right? Because of set-asides and the deeded set-asides plus whatever you need for drainage, et cetera, et cetera. So the short answer is yes, it is possible. Mm-hmm. Although the other thing that I found interesting was when he was engaged to consider it for a developer, his recommendation was leave it.
Yeah.
I agree.
And make it a one-way system for the sort of general aesthetic attractiveness of
Yes.
the asset. So I would put that out there as.
I would kind of agree with that approach. I mean, I think we should do as little as we need
Less
to
is
do.
more.
I mean, I think,
Yeah. Now, that said, as I toured the property, some of those roads are just in bad shape.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
But
definitely need
widening,
to repave,
widening,
but they don't need to
widening's
widen.
different than
Yeah.
Right, because then you destroy those natural drains, and so a good portion of the property has great, stone natural drains that you'd obviously just have to blow up, so.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get around widening from that front entrance gate to the main circle. I just don't see how you avoid that.
Why?
What?
Because there's no other way out of there.
There is.
Okay, but you hang on, you can't use the alternate exit point that goes across the little causeway That's not an acceptable exit route.
So this is where I want to see the survey, because
And this is what Jen Leahy said, because that leads to the Ziegler's other property.
right,
That's
so
allowable
I know
only
you
in
can't use
emergencies.
that one, but I've heard from a few different people that there are other mechanisms you could use to get out. I don't know what they are.
Show me. I did not
Yeah,
know that.
as I said, I don't know what they are, but,
Yeah. So I'm gonna posit that there is no other
Yeah.
road available on and off from the main gate to the circle, and at a minimum, that section would have to be widened. And I completely concur that apart from that, you can manage traffic in a much more kind of creative and intelligent way and avoid having to widen a whole bunch of roads throughout the property.
All right, so you're talking about from the main gate to the circle.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
that
that is
private-
narrow.
I don't see how you
Yes.
can avoid that. I mean,
That is narrow.
you have to have.
And the other way in off of, was it Good Wives Road or whatever it is there?
How long of a
Yeah,
stretch
there's
is
a good point, good one.
No, it's no,
Pear Tree
it's-
Point.
if you go up
Pear Tree Point.
Pear Tree
Pear Tree
Point,
Point, up by
yeah,
the,
there's an
up by the
entryway
barn.
on that side,
Up by
right?
the barn, there's an entryway.
But that's Ziegler
That
property?
is,
That's Ziegler property.
that goes under the Ziegler property,
Okay,
so
so
they
that-
allow that for emergencies only.
Okay, so
The
that's,
Europeans have a really fancy way of doing it, and it's like it kind of looks like an S, like, and basically this guy can go, and then this guy can go, and you just
Right, so I've
say
done that.
it's beautiful the way it is, and leave it, and you
So
make
we've done that in rural Scotland, but I think it's gonna be hard to manage for.
I mean, we can't handle the four-way stops in this town.
I guess it depends on what we're looking at ultimately, but I don't think it's like
Deal breaker.
a deal breaker or something that has to be done immediately. You know, I don't foresee 20,000 people wanting to go on the island at the same time. You know?
yeah, I think a traffic light, if you will, to, okay, you can go in now,
Correct.
and then you wait at the other end until the light changes, but I don't know how practical that would be at that intersection where Rings In and Good Wives and Pear Tree comes together. I mean,
Right.
you'd have, I think, a whole mess
line
backing up
Yeah.
on that side, so
Depending on what's going on.
I'm not sure that would be very feasible.
Right. Valid.
You can make it one way, meaning you have to go around to Pear Tree Beach and then back up, so the queue would actually come up.
The whole. Yeah.
You know, you try and sell that to the folks on the.
No,
Right.
never popular idea, actually.
And nobody's gonna be
But I
happy
think,
with this.
you know, Monica was talking about opportunities like wine festivals and such, and if you're gonna have
LOL.
400 or 500 cars coming
No.
in a short period of time, it's gonna be hard to manage traffic.
Right.
Yeah, no question.
Absolutely. No, I don't think a wine festival is happening anytime soon on that island.
And I don't see.
Although
this
I'd
being
love to go.
I don't see this being the kind of town where people are willing to park at the high school and take a shuttle bus. on
You
the
know, I
weekend.
just did that in Georgetown for Georgetown Days, and it made me think of the island. And did anyone go? They had, so you had to park sort of remotely, and then they had a shuttle
Shuttle
bus.
you over.
And I thought, oh, what have we gotten ourselves into here? This is gonna be, and it was amazing.
I think they do that at the
It
St.
was
Mark's Fair. in
Well
Maine.
managed. It was amazing. It was quite a lovely experience. They also had, I don't know what they're called, but like a four-wheel drive golf cart situation, a lot of them, with guys, I don't know, volunteers, whatever, driving people back and forth from the parking, and it was a bit of a hoot. But then I was like, well, where, you'd still have to park somewhere ultimately,
Pear Tree.
and where is that?
Pear
Pear Tree, I guess,
Right.
is the
I mean, it's close enough that you could have this.
yeah,
shuttles
so I
going
think
back
for
and forth.
something like, you know, if the town wants to do something in a year's time, really aggressive timeline for something, you know, that is a potential option.
Where
And it
does
was fun too. on
where
top
does the
of it.
purchase start? At the circle or at the gate?
So there's, I believe there's, the property that included in the purchase is the access road.
Wasn't there a house right
Including the
there?
gatehouse?
At the gatehouse.
Yeah, there is a house right in the
Because
corner.
there is, so if you keep going around the circle, there's another road that comes
Yeah.
out.
It does, and that goes up to the barn on the backside into, onto Pear Tree Road,
Right, and that's,
which is actually, would be really easy for an emergency perspective, and it is open, it's paved.
well, I went by there not too long ago and they had a chain.
Oh, yeah, it's
right
gated, no,
across.
it's gated, but
Yeah.
it's, what I'm saying is it's not, you could get through it if you needed to. I'm
Yes,
sure.
In an emergency.
Yeah, it's a real road.
okay.
I don't think we're buying the road. I think probably the deed
Yeah, no,
would say we have access
Yes.
to use it,
yeah,
but it won't be purchased, I think.
I think he's right. I think it would be an easement
6 one half of the other.
Right, I don't think under easement that, we could be starting to broaden that
I was
road.
gonna say, if we don't own it,
Much
broadening
more,
it might be a
yeah.
little crazy. I'm not crazy, but but I'm crazy, but
Yeah,
that's a little
that's
private car. If you show up with bulldozers and take that, somebody's probably calling.
We can call us, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Patrick, what do you have?
Ghostbuster.
I said we'll just declare eminent domain.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the condition of the roads such as it is within, as it snakes through the property, and yes, it's in very rough shape, so that's an issue. From a public works perspective, road maintenance, regular maintenance, as we do with the regular rest of the town, this would have to be added into the
If we don't own the
program.
road, if we don't own the roads,
No, I'm talking on the property.
I'm saying, if we don't own the roads on the property and we just have an easement or whatever the deal is, they're gonna be maintaining the roads.
Oh, no, the easement is only.
We're talking only from the entry.
From the road to the
To
traffic.
the traffic,
To the
circle, and then we
circle.
own it after that.
Yeah.
Correct.
But then to your
But
point,
they gotta keep the roads clear.
are they going to keep it clear? Are they going to clear the snow? Are they going to clear the snow fast
Right.
enough? Are we going to get complaints because et cetera?
Yeah.
And to a point that was made earlier around kind of the roads need paving, et cetera.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty finite road budget every year in terms of what we do in terms of maintenance. It's like, one thing we would be concerned about is if this sucks all of our road, rehabilitation plans
Funding.
for the next 3 years in terms of,
Yeah.
so that's where it can't, to the point earlier, if it pulls away from everything we're doing to maintain the rest of the town, that's a concern.
Maybe an
Sell some
independent governance
bricks.
structure with an independent governance.
Sell some bricks.
Sell some
Put
bricks.
some names on them.
That's right.
Real quick.
$1,000
A
a
lot of bricks.
We can pave the road to the bricks.
Make them yellow.
The yellow.
Blue Wave Pride.
Any other comments related to road systems, quote unquote?
I was interested in the snow plowing question. If we're still leasing property, what are our obligations to those tenants in terms of having the?
That's an excellent question.
I would, as I think about snow plowing also, I think about these are old roads with those stone drains, and there's a lot of curvature in that road. Is a plow gonna go over that, or are we looking at different plows that will?
Well, what do they do now?
Yeah, that's
They've been using
interesting.
regular plows. They were in the garage.
Were they?
They're using straight plows on the back of a F-350.
Right, but that's like a pickup truck. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
here in town, we've got
No,
big
but we wouldn't be able to
trucks.
use the big
Right,
honking trucks.
right.
I mean, this is not too complicated,
It
right? You
could
can use
all-
whatever they've been using for the last.
Well, that was the question we had: is the trucks in the garage? Are they coming with the deal?
That's a good question. Right? And we have plenty of
That's
trucks.
what we
We have plenty of trucks that aren't the big ones.
Right.
So, I mean, that's not a major thing.
But I mean, to Ian's point, one thing we talked about was, look, if the equipment is coming with the property, then fantastic. If not, then we're on the hook to buy a couple of tractors and a couple of trucks and, a bunch of other things that clearly the current staff thinks they need to manage the property.
As long as the sleigh comes with it.
Yes.
Sleigh was cool.
And the little hand cart. I know
Yeah,
the hand
that
cart
was good, yeah.
Little wooden
That
plow.
was so cool.
All right, the next item I think might be more a Parks and Rec question, but it's there, so touch on it quickly. Public restrooms. There aren't really any public restrooms. I mean, I think there's one restroom that they use at the stable, and other than that, there's no public restroom.
Or do we go back to septic versus sewer?
Yep, because if you're gonna start now to put in real public restrooms, yeah, you gotta hook them up. And we get back to the whole issue of the sewers, no question about it. So and you can't, I don't see how you could open up to the public without restrooms.
Well, you could use porta potties.
Yeah,
on
they
it.
have those.
Yeah, that's an
Little
alternative,
nice
but
ones.
I don't think that's certainly something that we wouldn't wanna think about doing for 30 years.
No,
On
no,
an interim basis, though.
right.
On an interim basis, possibly, and that would be really the only answer, but,
Don't they bring in
what is the
porta potties for,
interim
like, July 4th
period,
and
you know?
They're nice ones now.
Yeah.
We have nice ones now, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a,
They look like a mobile classroom.
yeah, like a mobile classroom too. They look
It's
like
nice
mobile
and bad.
Yeah.
It's fancy.
Sometimes they're air conditioning and everything. I mean, it's very.
Flowers.
nice.
Flowers.
Okay, parking.
Yeah.
You know, there's no formal parking lot, obviously. She was saying that, well, you know, we can park on the grass and that sort of thing. I don't know how
That's
much.
great for event parking, it's not good for day to day.
Yeah,
So-
I don't see that as really a long-term answer, that's for sure. I mean,
Right.
I didn't see enough space in any of those to, you know,
well, that,
Right.
no,
By
to
the
have
main
more than,
house.
you know, more than 50, 75 cars. You know, it just didn't seem.
and again, to me, that comes back to a plan.
Yep.
Okay, someone's got to sit down with the, whatever, the map geo, if you will, and start to, you know, okay,
Yeah.
what can we put here, what can we
And
put
making a
there?
trade-off. Do we need half a polo field or do we need some parking?
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like.
Right.
You also have to consider, do you want to put like central parking in the middle, or are you going to have smaller parking at each station around the island?
Station, yeah, absolutely. Which
And-
might make more sense because it is kind of broken up, as
Right.
you mentioned.
Right. It's also more
Yeah.
accessible.
Right.
Yeah.
And for larger events, we do have Pear Tree nearby with the fun golf carts.
Yeah.
And the helipad.
And as we look at the flooding map, that central thing is the usable space that won't flood. How much of that do you want to spend on parking?
Right.
Hey, if I may just add, you know, as we think about all of these various infrastructure issues, one of the things in the group that I was with touring, and it included Monica and you know, many other committee heads and that sort of thing. The discussion sort of, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but it seemed as though the consensus was, if some private partnership, public partnership, and the commission idea went forward, which seems to be what's evolving. You know, all of these issues and the funding of all of these issues, the planning, and all of that would evolve or emanate from that sort of group and deal with all. That's not to say that the town is responsible or wouldn't be responsible for paying for all of it, but all of these types of things in planning and ultimately how the layout changes or doesn't change would come from that group. So to be fair, I'm not really sure what our committee should be focused on in terms of what we should be thinking about in terms of what the expenses are going to be. So I'm a little confused as to what we can talk about all of these issues. I'm not sure what we're going to resolve.
Well, from my perspective, I'm just saying that I think the RTM is going to look to us to at least identify questions of concern to try and, if you will, open the park. Okay? And so I think we have an obligation as the Public Works Committee to point out what we see as the issues, the issues that we bring into question in order to achieve that objective of opening the park. I'm not saying we can put any figures to it or anything like that, but I think it's something that we should at least point out as part of our roles with the RTM, that these are issues that are going to have to be overcome in order to open the park.
So my summary for
Fair
all of
enough.
it,
I think maybe one suggestion might be that we maybe look at and take this whole list and divide it or add, not to make it more complex, but this is a short-term issue, this is a medium-term issue, and this is a long-term issue. And I think if we think about it that way, it might help us sort through what we ought to be thinking about as to the immediate question of, is this a go or a no-go? And with this committee, I don't know, I guess we're going to put it to a vote at some point. Do we approve or do we recommend, with reservation, moving forward on this purchase, and with the following provisos, that this is a near-term, short-term issue that needs to be resolved. This is a long-term issue that maybe can't be resolved. So I think we ought to think about what we're ultimately going to be recommending in terms of our resolution from this committee to the RTM.
my summary of all of this is every one of these items will require some level of investment to open the park to the public. How much and in what sequence is dependent upon the long-term plan, the short, medium, and long-term plan that is put together. And I'll go so far as to say, throw it out there to see if people agree, but our committee recommends that some form of commission be established to develop that short, medium, and long-term plan and have the ability to set the funding, right, all the things that Frank talked about. That is my personal way of summarizing where I land.
And so I appreciate that. And I agree with everything Patrick said as far as prioritization, but I want to say that my personal ability to support the purchase is in part based on whether I have confidence that there's going to be a governance mechanism in place that's going to yield us kind of the governance that we have all talked about that we want.
How do we,
So I think we need to make a motion amongst ourselves. I think we need to consider how do we impact the main motion that the RTM is going to consider on Monday the 27th. And it would be ideal to get some kind of commitment from the selectmen to say we agree with this process, with this model, and we commit in a binding way to having this done. If the selectmen aren't willing to do that, then I think as were you saying it on the tour, it's a leap, or Werner was saying, it's a leap of faith. I don't want to take a leap of faith for $103 million, plus.
yeah.
So at what point as a committee would we be voting to recommend or not recommend this plan?
We have a meeting scheduled 1 week from today, and we need to come to terms on what our position is going to be.
At that meeting?
Yes, because that's our last chance to have our minds together before the RTM meeting, voting on Monday the 27th.
But at the RTM meeting, people could just disregard what we say, all right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
we're just speaking as Public Works Committee people,
Right.
okay? They could tell us to take a hike.
So if we were, with understanding to be outside this committee, but if we were to wish to create some sort of a binding thing on the process to create a commission or whatever the right verbiage is, I understand that there's an amendment process through the RTM. If that were to transpire, would that be binding? Or is that just a suggestion the board of selectmen would be like, that's great, but...
Depends how it's worded, depends how it's structured.
Okay.
Right.
So I would, my interpretation on that, and I think that leads us down that path, is to say from our committee, from the Public Works Committee, that this acquisition will create a short, medium, and long-term burden on the public infrastructure of Darien. That's specifically our purview. So we know that the acquisition will create a burden on our public infrastructure. It's uncertain and we can scale and we should figure out in the short term, like just what the acquisition does to that, whether that's small, medium, large. But in the medium and long term, depending upon the use and the usage and the development plans for the property, it could have a small, medium, or large impact on the public infrastructure demands. And so in order to govern that burden on public infrastructure, that would be an avenue to say it needs to have a governance infrastructure that would actually give some parameters and structure for measuring that. Because we can't today say that it's going to be a massive burden on public infrastructure or zero. We just don't know because it's going to depend on how it's managed in the future.
Hey Jeff, could I just amend? You're saying it's going to be a burden on the infrastructure. Do you mean the infrastructure budget as opposed to the infrastructure itself?
The physical infrastructure.
Yeah, I would say both. I mean, so since they're intertwined, so it'll be a certain burden on the physical infrastructure, which the need to maintain and to manage that infrastructure is going to impact the annual budget process.
Because the way I envision it, I mean, this is just me and my own little beady mind, but this, let's call it a commission, yes, it's going to be funded, potentially, by the town, or at least the town is ultimately responsible. But, again, what I have heard is that this would be a public-private partnership of sorts. funding, and there's no certainty of that, of course, but where the funding needs for all of the work and maintenance and ongoing upkeep of this facility would still ultimately be backstopped by the town, but it would, because of that public-private partnership, and as well as netting revenues that are coming in from the existing revenue-generating entities that are there, which ultimately is probably just going to be limited to the stables, because I don't know that we're going to leave people living in homes on the property over a long period of time. But it would be not self-funding, but certainly would help to generate some revenue, as well as all of the events and everything else that goes with it. It ultimately comes down to what the structure of this is going to be, and what the revenue flows. You know, as Jared McGuire says, follow the money.
So Patrick, I agree with that, and like this is where I would say my slight tweak to what you were saying, Jeff, is not just the governance, but the governance and funding, right? So the stables are on an oral lease. There is not a written document.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And so that could be broken at any time by us or by them, right?
The homeowners are on a I
Month.
think there's one year, or I think there's a couple of 1-year leases. All the apartments are on 30-day rolling.
Right.
And
But if you
the
were
is not stable.
if you eliminate the rental properties and your revenue is the stables, you're now in the stable business. And so now you're competing against Oxford Hunt Club, there's several in Fairfield, there's the ones in Granite, like, so you're in that business, right, wrong, or indifferent, fine. But is that the business you actually want to be in? Or do you want to have other use? Like these are all trade-offs that we would need, and this is why I just add the funding piece, right? You just need to think about, are we going to invest more in the event side of it, the stable side of it, the part, like, where do we want to put
But I defer to finance and budget
Yeah, it's
on
not a.
on the financial viability and how the financial structure of that is.
Right.
So I think it just steps a little bit further beyond the purview of Public Works.
Correct.
It does. I guess where I was going was, this is why I think this commission we're talking about needs to not just be governing the ideas, it needs to be governing the finances.
100%, 100%. They've got to be, they're on the hook for the full.
Yes, they're running it like a business, because that's what it is.
So can we go back to how we get that in front of
Right.
the RTM, in front of the Board of Selectmen?
That's the most
Process
important part.
Well, I think, with Frank's help, we can put together some sort of wording in a motion of some sort, or statement from our committee that says, we are in favor of moving forward with this. However, we have a caveat that we would want to have it under a separate management team to follow this thing through from the planning stage, the financing, all the way through for the near and long-term purposes.
Hey, Patrick, it's Jeff Hudson. It sounds like this discussion's already going on within the selectmen. The idea of a P3, some public-private partnership with a funding mechanism and all the rest of that stuff. Am I jumping? Is that an assumption, or it sounds like that conversation was at least had on your tour?
You're partly right, Jeff. I think, and this is where I'm going to get out of my depth here, but because of the way that we're going, the discussion of how we're going to fund the purchase could be through initially short-term bonding that ultimately translates into longer-term bonding. The budgeting and revenue management of that type of a public-private partnership, if I haven't muddled this already, it ultimately has to be backstopped by the town. So
Yes.
I don't think that you can have a commission that operates as a fully separately funded organization, say like the sewer commission.
No, not if we're going to bond it. You're absolutely right. I mean, from my days of doing the muni stuff, yes, you're right.
So I know that there are, obviously, and thankfully, we have a depth of experience throughout the RTM and the Board of Finance that are thinking through this. But I think the recommendation from this committee in pointing out that there are going to be a laundry list of issues or things that ownership of this property will ultimately unlock that we're going to need to deal with. And again, there are near term, medium term, and longer term. And by the way, somebody mentioned earlier about the main house, and it's it hasn't been habited. It had habited since the 70s.
Mhm.
So let's remind ourselves that even Waveney, for example, for those of us that have been around a long time, Waveney, that house, main house, wasn't habitable until really about 10 or 12 years ago. Did they really start using it? Maybe 15 years ago. And it was just not used, and now they've ultimately turned it into offices and use it for events and all that sort of thing. So it's not unreasonable to expect that we could buy something and not really put it into usable shape until we've got the funding to do it. So I think that's just the way we have to look about all of this.
I liked Rolf's idea of hiring a HGTV show to come in.
Yeah. Can we get this old house? Norm Abrams?
I think it'd be this real old house.
It'd be 3 weeks and done.
That's right. The Property Brothers would come in.
The Property Brothers.
Property Brothers are coming in.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just gonna try and finish going through what was on the written agenda at least.
Are we just prioritizing things?
Well,
Otherwise, like
I'm
a-
starting to write down certain
Okay.
things are short term, near to medium, or
Okay.
near term rather, and then near to medium term, because I don't think we can really think much past medium
Right.
term. Grounds maintenance, that's a near term issue. I mean, the grounds have to be kept up. They have a crew doing that now. Okay, building maintenance, the only reason why I mention this is mostly in the interest of the main house. Because the main house is.
But I think also the stables.
I would think
Could be the
stables,
stables as
your rental
well.
properties that are inhabited today, how long are you gonna rent them, then they need to be maintained. I'd prioritize everything other than the main house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ed Jensen was out there, they did a survey in the main house.
Mhm.
They've been out there for
Yes.
the last
Couple
couple of weeks.
times. Yeah.
So we'd like to get a copy. I'm sure that would be an
Yeah.
interesting piece of document, because they did asbestos, they did the.
Yeah,
the
Ed
soils, the-
does have those.
No, I kind of rolled my eyes there that way.
Asbestos checked.
Yeah, there is some.
Hey, sure, a little. Lead paint check.
Apparently there's a whole room with
We were,
extra coal storage. that-
Excellent.
Nice.
Yeah.
For the burners that are no longer being used.
Oh, my
Yes.
goodness.
I wasn't on my tour, but
That's crazy.
yeah, nothing like a nice.
It was the room behind the wall, she pointed at it.
exactly, with a skeleton holds the door.
No.
Still though, I think someone would have to be on the lookout though for the main house as well, because I don't think we're gonna get to touch that for a while. And I think
It clearly
the
floods
basic, I just wanna be sure that the
because you can see
basic
the plastic
structure is kept intact
And not flooded.
and not let, if there's a water leak, that it gets addressed, that it doesn't
Right.
just continue to.
Yeah.
There was a bucket.
Oh, that's right, the bucket.
Down in the
That
basement.
overflowed.
Flood
Oh,
mitigation.
man. Wow.
Did you say I'm gonna call Chris about that?
Okay. Drainage, stormwater runoff and drainage, I mean, I'm sure that water drains off of that now, so I don't think that is a near-term issue per se. It might be a medium-term issue.
But you're right, that's part of the flooding issue that you raised.
Yeah, as time goes, I mean, with that FEMA designation, there are certain areas that are definitely gonna flood out. There's no doubt in my mind, it's, in some way, shape, or form. So I think it would be worth, on a medium-term basis, evaluating what the drainage is in those areas so that it doesn't pool and hang around and that it flows back off as, the tides recede and the storm recedes. Electric power service, I have no idea of what, I mean, obviously there's electric power service now, those people aren't living in the dark.
Right.
Okay, so I would consider that more of a medium-term issue. It's not an immediate issue, that's for sure. And that's
But
all I have, unless someone has
I mean-
something to add.
I would just say on the electric, in that garage, I
Yeah.
looked at the electrical
Yeah, we were-
panel,
Yeah.
you're gutting that wiring.
Yeah.
It's not I saw one modern panel.
Yeah, they still have the knob and tube in the main house too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they have the old
Fuses.
two fuses
Yes.
in that
Those are
garage.
awesome.
Like, I'm not even sure you could buy a replacement.
So we got to say,
Yeah, you can, you just
so
jump.
let's say
you just drop.
near term, we would want to do
Back that
inspect.
fire thing we're doing.
Near term, we would want to inspect and repair obvious safety issues. Electric safety is certainly a concern. We don't want to have any sparks and then all of a sudden, who knows what could happen.
Right.
Okay, anything else that, I could reissue this with, designation about near term, short term, whatever else. I can, and I pledge to pursue the redness in me study. Did Craig say anything about it himself in your
Just that they had done it, and my understanding, both from Jennifer and from Craig, is that because redness is meat and meat is on retainer from the town, that we have access to that information.
Okay, all right, I'll pursue that. I'll take that one on.
Rolf, we should have access to whatever Ed's notes are as well.
Yeah, I'll get in touch with him when he gets back on Monday for several things, the testing of the building and all of that sort of thing, any other grounds inspections that he's done.
But Darren probably has access to whatever the file is, huh?
He may, okay, that's a good point. I'll try Darren first. If he says I gotta wait for Ed, then I'll just follow what he says,
What was the other document we wanted, Jeff? You mentioned.
Well, the genteel piece.
The
and then the piece. But, I think Patrick had a very valid point, and Jackie asked the same sort of question, which is basically, what are we doing next time we're meeting? And we're not clearly going to go through the same agenda items and take these off. So, we should, whether it's Frank's, amendment or whatever the deal is, it sounds like we're circling one issue, which is.
I think the main issue, is going to be the organization, if you will, of this management group, however we want to call it, that's going to hopefully pick this thing up and go with it.
For our committee, though, that is, I could see that being structured as either one resolution or two resolutions. One resolution that's specific to our recommendation regarding the acquisition, which is all we've been asked for, really.
Yeah, that is the immediate question.
And
that
a
we've
second
asked for.
resolution,
Right.
any second resolution that is specific to the governance.
Well, I think the way this normally works, correct me if I'm wrong, Rolf, right, is the rules will delegate to F&B as the primary committee.
They are primary.
Right. So F&B will have the responsibility of writing the resolution that we presented on Monday the 27th.
Yeah.
Ideally, F&B would circulate that to the other committees in advance so that we would be able to evaluate and vote on that particular resolution with its particular wording prior to the meeting on the 27th, so that when we are recommending the right thing. Furthermore, if we're able to socialize our ideas about governance, it's not inconceivable that some of our ideas about governance could be baked into that right there. In which case, we're voting on maybe just one resolution. I think more likely we're voting on the thing from F&B that talks about the purchase without governance, and then we're going to have a second document that we're going to have to discuss and vote on related to governance, and then we'll put both those in front of the RTM and say this is what we have resolved to do, or that we've resolved to state.
Can our resolution on our view of the property be contingent upon?
Yeah, that's my thought.
So that becomes more of a legal question, like if we...
Yeah, Patrick, go ahead.
I would be shocked if a number of the other committees weren't also discussing the whole governance issue.
Right.
And
They are.
without violating any FOIA regs or, I think I might suggest that we sort of reach out to our other colleagues on the other committees that are due to report on this resolution to see, not necessarily that we have to reflect what they are working on, but let's not, all try to invent the same wheel at the same time. I have to believe that they're all going to be talking about the same kind of thing.
All right. Well, I'm sure they're being recorded, so as soon as that comes out on Vimeo, that's one way to find out what their thinking is, certainly. I know they're, between today and tomorrow, they're meeting. I'll chase Jim Cameron to get it up on Vimeo as quickly as possible. short of that, then yeah, we can have any volunteers that might want to contact the heads of those
I mean,
committees
I
to
can, I
just,
can talk to F&B to see if that's a topic that they are
pursuing.
I mean, you know, any resolution that comes to the floor along the lines of, separate from the go, no-go, the purchase, if it starts getting bogged down with amendments, I think it's going to be, well, I think it may be along that anyway.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Be an issue. But I think dealing it as a separate resolution, I think probably has a better chance of getting a fair hearing and ultimately the right result. I can't imagine it's going to be terribly specific, other than that there should be some central governing body that should be put in place to, and this is where we have to sort of wordsmith, or the collection of us have to wordsmith what this is going to say and what parameters it's going to be given, because we're delving into how everything gets financed. So it gets a little, it gets a little wish-washy.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, if you're willing to probe finance and budget, I would.
I'll do that.
So Patrick, Frank Edelman here. I don't think you were connected earlier, but I've already spoken with Jack Davis and shared some of the thoughts that I shared with the group here about governance. So I'd encourage you to start with Jack, because we've already had the conversation. And Rolf, for your perspective, I've already spoken also with Matt Patrick on health and safety.
Health and safety, yeah.
So I've obviously reached out to a few other people as well.
Well, I think the other two committees of interest would be Parks and Rec and, as you point out, Public Health and Safety. Those are the two that come to my mind. Anybody?
Can somebody remind me who ultimately is responsible for making the decision? Is it a votable thing at an RTM level, or is it a selectman thing? How do the politics
selectmen
work?
have already voted.
Yeah, the selectmen voted last night.
Great, but there's no funding until the RTM votes to appropriate the money.
Right, but the governance piece.
So the governance piece would end up reporting under the selectmen. So.
So my question is how much real? I mean, we can go through this whole thing.
Exercise.
Right. How much real ability does the RTM have to affect the structure of this?
Well, hang on. Let's talk about hard power and soft power.
Yeah.
Okay. So, can we put limits on what the selectmen can do? Can we dictate to them what they should be doing? We cannot.
Right. That's what I thought.
However, if we, wave my magic wand, if we had a resolution that we all unanimously supported here about governance, that we were all aligned in was a very good idea, and other committees thought it was a good idea too, and they are all in support of it, and it's clear that it's going to get passed at the RTM, right? Then it would behoove the selectmen to get in line with that and make and show some public state. What I'm looking for is a commitment of some sort from the selectmen that they will do these things that we want them to do.
But the purchase decision will have already been made.
Well, I guess if without a commitment from the selectmen, my ability to support the purchase is going to be much more in question.
The other way of asking the question is, could we make the approval of the money contingent upon the selectmen agreeing to this?
Well, I think that's a more complicated question. I don't think we can.
So that
You can make your vote.
Our hard answer,
But my vote
is no.
That's what I'm kind of.
So is it worth putting a letter into the editor of the paper and stating why we believe this and possibly influencing other people and putting out the public opinion?
I think what we really should do is ask the RTM to vote a sense of the RTM. A number of years ago, when the budget question came up, the budget used to be the school system and the town budget were together, and we separated them. And then one year, we voted in the RTM, sense of the RTM, that we approved the town budget, but we weren't happy with the overall increases, and we look forward to a reduction the next year, which did occur. So I think there should be some statement where there's a sense of the RTM on governance, some statement that the RTM votes on, and this then becomes the message to the selectmen that, you know, we need something. If you go back and you look, I can attest that when we voted that year, the next year, the town budget actually did improve. We have no control over the education budget, but the town budget did improve. So I think we should have a resolution like the sense of the RTM, and we all be asked to vote.
So
On
if
the governance
all we can
issue.
do is a sense of the RTM, then that's all we can do. I'm hopeful that we can get a more concrete commitment from the selectmen. We have 2 weeks, right? In order to actually have them commit in some more tangible way that they're gonna support an enhanced governance process other than simply an ad hoc committee. Because I think an ad hoc committee is not strong enough to do what we have all talked about wanting to do.
Yeah, if I may, I agree, Frank. I think, I would just make a couple of observations. The first is, you know, I think the selectmen, it's just a personal opinion. I think they've tried to be as open and transparent about this, far more so than I guess I expected. That's not a personal thing to anybody. I just, in looking at past examples, that, you know, by comparison, this has been a very open process. And I mean, to the extent that we each received a copy of the contract and you know, a number of other documents that we've asked for, just generally, I'm very encouraged by that. And to that, beyond that, I think that they are very open to looking for the right solution. I think many of them have been, Monica in particular, been very open about they don't know what the right answer is in terms of what the ultimate outcome. I mean, this is a project that's going to go on for 100+ years, right? And you know, we're not just buying this for us; we're buying it for, you know, the future generations of Darienites. So I don't think anybody wants to lock into, hey, you're stuck on this for forever. So I think there's very much of an expectation that this is going to evolve, and furthermore, that the town administration, it's my personal opinion that the drop Great Island on the town administration to manage, you know, as a whole entity itself is a lot to ask, and that would strain certainly the Department of Public Works and the Parks Department by itself. So I think it cries out for having its own management process and planning and management process, and I think they're open to that. So it's a long-winded way of saying I think we should ask the selectmen for that kind of commitment and or get their input and see whether or not they might even be willing to attend next week's meeting. I don't know.
So, well, just real quick, if they're open towards it, how come they haven't put it forth? I don't think it's been a priority.
Yeah.
Honestly, they've been swamped with giving tours and getting the deal done and all kinds of stuff. And I think we need to, now is the time where we as the people who hold the purse strings can say, look, here are the limits on what we're willing to fund.
They want our input.
So in addition to everything we've talked about, should we also, like, I'm sitting here thinking, what could we do? Like, fire off our email to Monica, like, separately as private citizens, all of us start layering it in now.
Well, you could do that. I had contact with Monica earlier today. She wanted to come to the meeting, but with the Board of Finance having their meeting this evening, she had no choice but to go to that. So she said, let me know. I advised her that we were going to be meeting next week. And she said, well, let me know, if you want me. And so I can get back to her and say, yeah, we want you to be at next week's meeting. And I'll let you all know what her response is.
Great.
If she says, I can't see clear to make it, I'll let you all know, and then you can all chime in with your own individual emails and say, we really think you should be here. Okay?
Is there anybody else? Anybody else that we need to invite?
Well, the other person that she volunteered on for him is for Ed Gentile.
So I was just wondering, do you think there are other RTM committees that want a piece of Ed's time? Like, is this Parks and Rec going to want to see him? And so that because there was encouragement for us to get together with other RTM committees.
Between today and tomorrow, Parks and Rec RTM committee is meeting and voting on the proposition,
Oh, wow.
okay?
We don't have a proposition to vote on.
Well, I'm just telling you, that's what's on their agenda. It says to vote on the Great Island.
Good luck.
Okay? Yeah, I think it's a premature thing to do.
There's no language to vote on, right?
Right, yeah, I understand, because it hasn't even, as of, whatever, prior to this meeting beginning and the Board of Finance meeting, they haven't approved anything yet. They met on that tonight, okay?
So there's nothing for rules.
So it hasn't moved to the RTM yet until they approve it, and that was gonna happen tonight. So, when we all get home, we can find out what happened. And then, Public Health and Safety also was meeting and voted on the proposition as well.
Today?
I don't know whether their meeting is tonight or tomorrow night.
There's no resolution to
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying.
consider.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Patrick. I'm just reading from what they had on their agenda. Now, if they maybe during the course of their meeting decided not to vote, to wait for more information, that's certainly another possibility, okay? But, the way we'll find out is to find out what the result of their meeting was, okay? So it turns out coincidentally, that the fact that we're not voting tonight is actually probably better, okay? So we can get better information for us to make our own decisions.
So
Okay.
let's say our committee votes in favor or against, whatever it is, and then that's the recommendation of this committee, right? But still, we all vote as individuals at the final thing.
Yes, when you get to the RTM meeting, it's you as an RTM representative
Interesting.
representing your constituency.
So it's
And your own,
that everyone could recommend it and then it still not go through.
Certainly is.
yeah, it's conceivable.
Do we, as a committee, do we ever make a recommendation that is not unanimous?
Absolutely.
Yes.
We do.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, when we come to terms with some verbiage next week, yes, we'll vote on that. And yeah, it could be, so many in favor and so many against. That's
Okay.
certainly possible.
And if
Does-
RTM votes against this,
It's done.
it's
over.
done.
It's
The
finished,
island's not
the opportunity
purchased. That's
is
it.
gone.
Well, from a parliamentary point of view, I think it could get re-raised in a later session. However, from a contractual
Yeah.
point of view,
Contractual.
our deadline is July 28th at 5
Yeah,
p.m.
the day after the
June
RTM meeting.
Sorry, June 20th, yes, sorry.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Right, so does everybody have a better idea about where we are per se, which is at this moment pretty close to nowhere? But at least we talked it out.
I don't think I'm supposed to know. I think the train's moving at 60 miles an hour, man.
You do?
I do.
I tell you, a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks.
Question is, are we on the train, are we on the tracks or are we on the station?
Can I just ask everyone, a quick show of hands? I've heard from 3 constituents about this.
Yeah.
Have you guys been hearing from your
One.
constituents?
I've heard from one.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple.
I've
And
heard from a
what-
couple.
Are we?
I've been canvassing my neighbors, but
Okay.
We had
I-
a neighborhood meeting, so.
Oh, nice.
It was really, it was a
Are
convenient
you
time.
guys hearing a lot of fors or against, or are we allowed to share what people
I
want
mean,
their?
I'm not going to name my constituents,
No.
but the 3 people who reached out to me were all leaning negative on the basis of cost.
Okay, yeah, and I would like to see the finance.
Well, I know that Jack Davis had a meeting recently, and when they went, and they are putting together like a pro forma that takes us out
Yes.
like 6 years
Okay.
with certain assumptions about not only the financing of the acquisition, but also some assumptions about operating costs, as well as maintaining a certain level of financing for our normal town requirements of the Board of Education and the town of Darien, as we know it, separate from the Great Island. And so when I know he's in the process of putting that together. What I don't know is when he will have it done and be able to share that with the RTM at large. I would hope to think that certainly would be before the meeting.
Look, I had a lengthy call with Jack today. I don't want to, I would not be able to do justice to the work he's done. He's certainly doing a characteristically comprehensive and detailed analysis.
Yes.
So fear not, every contingency is being accounted for. And I think he intends to share that promptly, but I don't know exactly what his timetable is.
Yeah.
I would say I've gotten
split feedback. Some people are super excited about the open space and all that, and the negative feedback has been about cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
Do I have any volunteers who would be interested to contact Patrick at Public Health and Safety to get any input after he has his meeting with his committee?
I can follow up.
You're-
I spoke with them already
All
over
right.
the weekend.
All right, so you want to take that on?
Sure, I'll be glad to.
Okay, Frank Edelman, you're assigned. Anybody have an interest to contact Parks Committee, RTM Parks Committee, after they have their meeting?
I
Pick-
can.
Pick, all right, so, that would be the committee chair. I can't remember her
I'll
name.
look it up. My neighbor's on the committee, so
Oh,
I'll
okay.
ask for
Yeah,
the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, check the meeting schedule to make sure that they first have their meeting before you try and chase them down, or you can say, once you have your meeting, I'd like to, speak to you on behalf of the Public Works Committee to get your feedback.
And this is just feedback in general, or is it more about the governance?
Well, I think you're gonna have to feel that out,
Okay.
okay? And we'll see how good an interviewer you are.
So the answer was yes.
Yes and yes.
Okay,
But don't tell them what we're doing.
I
Don't you dare, yeah.
Please, absolutely tell them what we're doing, and I mean, if the chair is interested, I mean, I would love to coordinate with that chair with whatever document I can put in front of you, Rolf.
We're not saying sell our idea, but sell our idea.
All right, I'm gonna impose on you one more thing, Frank.
Awesome.
You said you were in the process of putting together verbiage and wording,
Yes, sir.
okay? Do you think you could have that ready for a week from today?
Oh, absolutely. I would hope to send that out over the weekend at the latest,
Okay.
so that we all have some time to think about it.
But not talk
Again,
about
But
it.
not
Yeah.
talking about
Right, never that talking
No talking about it.
No emailing.
Can we talk about it next Wednesday?
Yeah, that's
We're
what
talking about
I'm
it next
saying.
Wednesday, okay?
And again, what are the rules about talking? I mean, people are allowed to talk one-to-one. So if I run into Richard in the supermarket, I can say, hey, what you think? And he can tell me what he thought. But
Yeah.
if then we run into Rolf, then we have to stop talking about it because
We're all at the supermarket.
Maybe we should-
No go.
We should all really need $3. And God forbid there's 7 of us together.
But I think Rolf was very, very thoughtful about that when you were developing the tours, that you didn't want to have
Thank
a
you, Rolf.
quorum.
Oh, yeah, that was part of the challenge in organizing the tours, is I could not allow a quorum, so.
Yeah, I think that was smart. I think it was very smart.
Yeah, well, that was the instructions.
Great. So I want to be just respectful and mindful of that as well.
Okay, very good. Does anybody else have anything else to talk about in terms of tonight's meeting? Because I want everybody to have an opportunity, everybody's talking about this being an open process, and so we want to carry that on here at the Public Works Committee. So we will be meeting again, so it's not your last word, but if you have anything for tonight.
Thank you for those maps, they were very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
All right, then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Jackie moves, Frank seconds. Everybody in favor, raise your hands, say aye.
Aye.
Motion,
Patrick,
meeting is adjourned.